Hello, friends. Welcome to Test Those Breasts podcast. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. I am a retired teacher of 20 years and a recent breast cancer survivor. My life was pretty nutso for over a year, and many of you most likely know just how overwhelming this diagnosis is, and the more I can help empower women, the better. I launched my podcast on June 11, 2023, which was the 1 year anniversary of my diagnosis, as a healing mechanism, and have made it my mission to help shorten the learning curve for future diagnosed breast cancer patients and their caregivers. I want you to know that you are not alone. I was told from the very beginning that being diagnosed with breast cancer opens us up to a sisterhood of all sisterhoods. But some people need that extra help and encouragement with all of the confusing and many times downright scary information they are being flooded with. I have been interviewing many survivors, caregivers, oncologists, surgeons, nurses, therapists, advocates, and more in order to provide much needed holistic guidance for your journey. And in case you were wondering, the name of my podcast was born out of the understanding that when it all comes down to it, early detection is the number one key ingredient to having a smoother journey. So please make sure you are testing and testing often. I am always looking for guests to add value to my show, and I'm also looking to be a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. Breast cancer is such an epidemic, so the more empowered we are, the better. I rely on people like you to listen, rate, review, and share the podcast with your loved ones. So please listen to my trailer and any other episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm on Apple, Spotify, and other platforms. Now let's listen to the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Hello, friends. Welcome back to Test Those Breasts podcast. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. Today, I am honored and thrilled and excited to have my guest, Dr. Minas Chrysopoulo. Dr. C is a board-certified plastic surgeon and microsurgeon and president of PRMA Plastic Surgery in San Antonio, Texas. He specializes in state-of-the-art breast reconstruction with a particular focus on perforated flap breast reconstruction, techniques to maximize aesthetic outcomes after breast cancer surgery, and restoring sensation after mastectomy. He is also a strong advocate for shared decision-making between the healthcare team and patient, and is very proud to co-lead the Shared Decision and Personalized Care Expert Group at the World Health Innovation Summit. Dr. C is the founder of Tolman Health, a digital health company committed to helping physicians, healthcare organizations, and industry improve patient experience and outcomes via empowering shared decision-making technology. Tolman's flagship product, the Breast Advocate app, is the world's first shared decision-making app for breast cancer surgery and breast reconstruction. Breast Advocate provides anyone with a breast cancer diagnosis or at risk of developing breast cancer a much-needed voice in their breast cancer surgery decision-making. Another area of strong interest for Dr. C is skincare safety, particularly for cancer survivors. Considering the necessary high safety profile required for patients after a cancer diagnosis and treatment, he created Invincible Skincare to ensure his patients had access to only top quality, safe, ethical, and effective ingredients. He believes everyone deserves the same high quality and safety in their skincare. Hello, Dr. C. Thank you so much for being here on my podcast, Test Those Breasts. I am incredibly honored to have you here. I ran across you on another podcast called Rewritten Me, and I have listened to your episode actually a few times because I've been so fascinated by a particular app that you have created. And we're going to talk about that in a little while, but you are a surgeon in Texas. Welcome and thank you for being here. I appreciate it. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks very much for the invitation. It's lovely to be here, lovely to get acquainted, lovely to see you and hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have now followed you on Instagram on a couple of different pages, but I wanted to put it out there to my audience. So I have been sharing that episode that you have been on, but I wanted to get more information out to my audience as well. And I am a breast cancer survivor. I became cancer free in December after my deep flap surgery I had in New Orleans. And I remember back after I finished my chemo back in October, I had some very quick decisions to make, and it can be incredibly stressful and overwhelming, which is exactly what I went through. And I had to really change directions when I found out about the deep flap, but I didn't find out through my surgeon. I found out through three different friends of mine who reached out to me and told me about this type of surgery that I had no clue even existed. And so I canceled my surgery here where I live because I knew that if I had the mastectomy here, it would go into immediate reconstruction and implants. And that is not something I wanted to do. And I
Mhm.
was very adamant about it. So I real quickly did my own research, talked to a lot of people, and ended up going to New Orleans.
How did your local docs take that?
I try to be really careful because I have a lot of respect for my local surgeon, and she is a wonderful surgeon, and we just don't have that kind of surgery here in Reno. And I had asked her about it when I was in my appointment with her. And I said, I heard about this surgery where they use your own tissue. And she said she didn't really know much about it. But her biggest
Mhm.
concern was that there was no local care when I came back to Reno. And that's all I actually spoke to her about. We didn't sit down and talk about my options and what was best for me, which I'm very much an advocate on about having providers really sit down and talk to patients and be part of those decisions on what's best for their bodies. So, my ultimate decision to go to New Orleans happened to be the best decision for me mentally, physically, emotionally, the whole 9 yards. So I'm all about holistic healing and incorporating holistic healing into the whole process. So I canceled the surgery and I just haven't spoken to her since. That's my story. And I wish so much I would have run across you and your app earlier, and we will talk about that. But first, I really want to dig into having you share what led you to become a plastic surgeon and microsurgeon, and how has that impacted your personal and professional life?
Oh, that's a great question. I wanted to be a physician, I think, when I was 8. So I came across an essay I wrote in English class, and it was entitled Why I Want to Be the Queen's Eye Surgeon. And so I grew up in London. I have no idea why I wanted to be the Queen's surgeon, and specifically an eye surgeon at that. But that's apparently what I thought I wanted to be when I was 8. When I was 16, I knew, or I felt very strongly that I wanted to become a plastic surgeon, but that wasn't because of all the Hollywood movies. That was because watching my dad was a huge history buff, and he would watch whenever he could, he would watch history documentaries. And connecting with him and bonding with him over history is what actually exposed me to the history and the origins of plastic surgery. Because in particular, he was very keen on learning about the world wars. And so plastic surgery really came into its own during the world wars, because that's really when reconstruction took off in terms of a necessity as a specialty. And so seeing all these documentaries that would show wartime reconstructive surgery and the horrendous injuries that soldiers would have to deal with and recover from, and the reconstructive procedures that were being performed to restore people's noses and faces and limbs and all these things, I found that absolutely fascinating. And then the more I got into plastic surgery, the more I realized how broader specialty. It is, and it involves microsurgery, so much so that the first kidney transplant was actually performed partly by a plastic surgeon, which no one knows that. But so plastic surgery was instrumental in tissue transplantation and the birth of that too. And I went to medical school only because you had to become a doctor first before becoming a plastic surgeon. So for me, medical school was a means to an end. And then being exposed to plastic surgery, initially, actually, it was microsurgery, but more towards hand surgery. And then I stumbled across breast microsurgery out of community need, really, where I was working initially, much like your experience, tissue transplants, complex tissue reconstruction wasn't being offered to breast cancer patients. And so I started doing that, and actually I fell in love with it, and I far preferred it to hand surgery. And so then my breast reconstruction kind of practice took off. And like most people these days, unfortunately, we have breast cancer in our family. My godmother passed away from breast cancer. Yeah, lots of reasons, really. I love the way, as my practice and experience matured, I love the way that breast reconstruction really includes absolutely everything about the plastic surgery specialty, complex reconstructive techniques, microsurgery, restoring form and function. That's what the word means, plastikos. It's from the Greek. So it means to mold and restore. So that's what plastic surgery is. And then, of course, you add the aesthetics and the critical nature and contribution of the aesthetics and having a good aesthetic eye and the artistry of it. And you've got a really incredible specialty that's very powerful. And I just love being in a team that specializes in it and being surrounded by people that are so passionate about it. We're very lucky. In my practice, PRMA in San Antonio, we have 8 surgeons and we all have the same passions. We very much focus on tissue transplantation techniques like the deep flap for breast reconstruction and for higher risk patients. And really, it's just grown from humble beginnings. And now we see people from all over the country and even other parts of the world that travel for these complex, very natural procedures. And specialty just keeps getting better and better. And we're restoring feeling, we're preserving feeling. We've moved on from just creating a breast mound to actually preserving sensation, as much of it as possible, restoring feeling, focusing on the aesthetics, and as much as possible, leaving women looking like they've had a mummy makeover rather than a cancer operation, so they can enjoy the rest of their lives and get back to their lives as much as possible. Anyway, long-winded answer, but that's me in a nutshell.
I love your long-winded answer. By the way, my husband and I are history buffs ourselves. We both retired from being a social studies teacher. And
Cool.
so I love hearing the historical background. And I love the fact that you have had this desire to go into this, or maybe not, you didn't think about breast surgery or anything like that, but just this desire from such a young age, which tells me a lot about you. There's some people who go into the medical field for reasons that aren't necessarily personal, or maybe it's just for the money. I don't know. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. My nephew is doing his residency at Mayo Clinic right now in Minnesota, and it's a
Excellent.
lot. So I know how much physicians, surgeons, I know how much you guys go through. So thank you for being in our community and doing what you do. And I loved your long-winded answer. It wasn't. It was very fascinating. So this tells me also, and I'm sorry to hear about your godmother. That is, it's very difficult, I'm sure. But that also has a connection to some personal experience.
Sure.
And I don't know how I would have known about these other kinds of surgeries, because when I think about reconstruction, all I ever thought of were implants. And I have been very vocal about letting people know that I do not have anything against implants. I think every woman should and man should be able to do whatever they want with their body of what feels best for them. But we just didn't have the knowledge here in our town. I when I came back from New Orleans, I was telling people what I did, and people were like, "I've never even heard of that." So my biggest mission is to get it out there of the possibilities and options that women do have. Not all women can afford to do it, which I'm really happy about CMS's decision about the
Mhm.
deep flap surgery that just came out recently that will make it more accessible to more women. And I'm just grateful that I know about this. And now I can let other people know about these surgeries. And then again, your app that we're going to talk about in a bit. Breast surgery, as I said before, is our breast cancer itself is so incredibly overwhelming. I know that I went through some seriously deep, dark places in the last year and fear, so much anger. And I will tell you straight up, I loved my breasts, and a lot of women do. They love their breasts, like, we're attached to them. We love the feeling, and so I was absolutely horrified when I found out that I had to have a mastectomy and what road I was about to go down. And so one of the reasons I went to New Orleans is because I know that they deal with all things holistic
Mhm.
healing. And so what are your philosophy on incorporating holistic approaches in your practice?
I think it's crucial. I think you have to do it. And holistic means different things to different people. So that's the first thing you have to explore is what's important to the person. It's yet another aspect of care that you need to approach in a shared decision making way. For some people, it's the incorporation of acupuncture. For others, it's certain aspects of diet. For others, it's certain aspects of their lifestyle that's going to help them with their mental health and their journey in terms of dealing with things emotionally. It's not it's not a simple menu that everyone follows, right? I don't have a holistic checklist that we give patients or anything like that. But what comes out of getting to know the person and the patient, the family, their support structure, their needs, their lifestyle choices, preferences, work, all of the above, that approach in and of itself is holistic and has to be. Just because you're a candidate for a procedure doesn't mean it's the best procedure for you. For some women, breast implants are the best option. It's just, to your point, it's unfortunate that some people, that's the only option they're given, right? To answer your initial question about holistic approaches, I'm very open to listening to patients and what that means to them individually and what's important to them. And if it's certain nutritional things or beyond the nutritional components that we recommend for to optimize healing and all the rest of it. If it's certain activities, if it's Eastern medicine, acupuncture, whatever it may be. Yeah, absolutely. You have to consider it. It's an incomplete treatment plan, really, if you don't, for some patients more than others. But yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, it is incomplete. I've always been into holistic healing, and I definitely am aware that it's not a one size fits all and there's no checklist. It's one of those things where you you when you do get to know the person, that's where the menu comes from. It's like, you know what? You're having problems with this. You should try this and maybe
Mhm.
incorporate this into your life as far as nutrition or meditation or yoga or things like that. I will say that after my breast surgery, I have definitely felt so much better about my decision. I did have to fork out 10 grand to do it just because I was out of network. They took
Mhm.
my insurance, but it was out of network, but very well worth it to me. And luckily, I have a cancer policy that I somehow had the wherewithal to get when I was in the school district. And so I was reimbursed for quite a bit of that. But I really do believe also that if other areas have the kind of surgery that I decided to go with, like if I had it here, if we had that option here in Reno, I do believe that my amazing surgeon here would probably have sat down with me and talked to me about those options. I really want somebody to come to our area so that people have that option without having to go out of the area. I want to get into your awesome app. It is called Breast
Breast
Advocate app,
advocate.
and it's
Mhm.
free. What led you to developing that app?
It was really to fill a void that I was experiencing in my own practice. When you start off in practice, your focus is different. It's about offering the best service you can, the best outcomes, honing your skills. It's all very kind of a personal, technical focus, right? And then once you've been doing it for a while, other things kind of creep in because you're comfortable doing what you're doing, you've got the experience, you've proved to yourself that you can do it. You don't really, the ego is checked, you've got a few more gray hairs, you're more humble, other things become a little bit more noticeable, important, whatever. Your practice just changes, your philosophy changes as you mature. And so for me it was, and especially as PRMA was evolving and was getting, our footprint was widening, our net was widening, and we're getting people from all over. And then it just hit me how I was hearing the same issues from patients who were traveling to see me, that irrespective of their geography, that really echoes what you've been saying and what your experience has been. If I had known then what I know now, then I wouldn't have done this, or then I would have chosen something else, or whatever, fill in the gaps. But basically, it was lack of information, lack of complete information, lack of a full discussion about all the options, and lack of involvement in the treatment planning of their own treatment. And I thought, I should look into this, right? It was infuriating how so many people weren't happy with their experience. And some were disappointed, others were upset, and some were very mad. It was a whole broad spectrum. So I thought there has to be something out there that can help us fill this gap. There's got to be an app for that, right? There's an app for everything. And then as I was researching everything, number one, there wasn't an app. And then number two, I came across this concept, this approach called shared decision making, which was actually first described back in the 80s, right? So it's an old concept. It's been around for a while. And so the more I read about shared decision making, the more I realized how it was the antithesis of what I was brought up with in terms of the doctor-patient approach and relationship. So when you get to my age, when you look back on the training that we had, it was more paternalistic, right? So the patient comes in, doctor tells them what they think and what they should do, and the patient says, "Thank you very much, doc." Especially in the NHS. In the UK, the doctor's always right. I grew up in the National Health Service. I came through the system in the UK, and you never had, it was the epitome of apprenticeship. That's what medical training tends to be anyway, wherever you are. But we would sit there in the corner of the room, listening to the consultation between the consultant, the specialist, and the patient. And it was very much, whatever you say, doc. That was the philosophy. That was the mentality. Especially the older population, very respectful of the physician, but there was no two-way conversation. The only exchange was what the patient would express what they were feeling, but that was about it, their symptoms or something, but not their preferences or what's important to them in their lives and what they have to get back to in terms of work and what their fears were and what their support structure was like and all these things. There was none of that. And then I thought I was doing a good job of explaining everything to patients, but what I realized was that really, while I wasn't paternalistic, I was more informational. So I think I was doing a good job of explaining many options and risks, and all the options actually, and the risks. And we're very blessed at PRMA because we're able to have those conversations because we do offer all the options, right? But then I realized that, yes, I was giving all the info, but I was still following up with a recommendation, which was being offered to the patient before I had truly even tried to understand what was important to them. You can have someone who's a perfect deep flat candidate, absolute perfect deep flat candidate, perfect lower abdominal tissue. They check all the boxes. They're going to have a wonderful result. You're working with a top-notch breast surgeon. It's going to be a home run. You're like excited to be able to provide this outcome. But ultimately, if the patient wants implants, they're not going to be happy. But to understand why a patient wants implants, what their goals are, their preferences, their values, that's a crucial part of the exchange. And so the patient needs to educate the physician too, in terms of what they're bringing to the table before you can make a shared decision, and the best decision actually for the patient. You can have twins, same body habitus, same diagnosis. And really, if you practice shared decision making, you can end up with a completely different treatment plan for each of those from a surgery standpoint. Because what's important to one person may be completely unimportant to another.
Right.
So looking around, there wasn't anything that offered that in terms of an app or any technology. And so I put a team together and we made it. We got some patients together. We got an advisory board together for the app. We had a specific patient advisory board. We had experts checking all the boxes for the different subspecialties. So physician-wise, we had obviously plastic surgeons, multiple, breast surgeons, medical oncologists, radiation oncologists, geneticists, rehab specialists. We had the full spectrum. And for patients, we had patients who had recovered from a breast cancer diagnosis. We had patients who had gene mutations and were high risk from a family history also. We had patients divided up based on the choices they had made. So breast conservation, so lumpectomy, oncoplastic surgery. We had patients that chose to have aesthetic flat closure, going flat. We had patients that had prophylactic surgery or risk-reducing surgery, patients who had surgery for invasive disease, DCIS, nipple sparing, skin sparing, immediate, delayed, implants, tissue expanders, tissue, different types of tissue. It was a massive undertaking. And honestly, it was one of the biggest personal growth experiences of my life, because before I did that, I actually thought I was a good physician. But that highlighted so many areas in which I had an inflated opinion of how well I was doing. I think it just made me better. That process made me better. It was really very interesting. It was humbling and exciting at the same time, because it was like, crap, if I thought I was doing such a good job and I had so many holes, then maybe this app can really do some damage. Yeah, the process has been really a lot of fun, and it's out there, it's doing well. People are downloading it. People are telling us they're finding it useful, and we've got industry sponsoring it so we can keep it going. It's always going to be free to the patient. That's super important. That's not up for discussion. That's non-negotiable, as I tell my kids.
You have a growth mindset, as I used to tell my kids. And in the years that I was teaching, there were times where I changed the way that I interacted with my students, and it really helped with my teaching craft, just because, and I just became a better teacher because of it, and including them in on decisions and making it more student centered so that I could find out more about them. And that just changed the way I taught. So I think that's really neat. I don't know how much time you have. I know we have allotted 30 minutes, but I do have a few more questions. But I also wanted to ask you, In this app, there is a review, and I'm wondering if I can read it to my audience.
Sure.
So this was really cool. And it was a little while back, but I thought it was really neat because it's from an oncology nurse navigator. I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's pretty cool. She gave you 5 stars.
Cool.
And it says,
Well,
as an oncology nurse navigator specializing in breast cancer, I can attest to the importance of shared decision making. Many patients are either unaware or not informed of all treatment and surgical options. This can create the feeling of being overwhelmed and having unnecessary pressure to make a decision without knowing the facts. That being said, this proves there was a definite need to organize all the resources and information, and that's what the Breast Advocate app does. The Breast Advocate app is a wonderful tool for patients, navigators, and treating physicians. Treatment options are personalized and reviewed through a quick and easy questionnaire. Patients are also able to connect with others at various stages of treatment and survivorship, creating a virtual support group at your fingertips. The resources available are informative, concise, and fact based. I've referred several patients to the app and have used the app myself to obtain information about unique patient diagnosis. I highly recommend all breast cancer patients, navigators, treating physicians to download and use this app.
awesome. That is a great
I
review.
know. That's exactly very similar to what I would have said, just because even though I wasn't able to use it for my own decision making, knowing it's there for other people, because of my experience, I've become quite the advocate, and I'm on a mission to get the information out to people that they need to know, because it is so overwhelming. And I did go through the app pretty thoroughly, and there's so much research out there. And I also went into the comment section, the discussion sections, because there's all kinds of different topics. And I have read your responses to people who ask questions. You are a very personable, knowledgeable, and clearly caring person from what I
Thanks.
have heard on the podcast and read. You can just tell that this is in your bones. And it's just nice to know that there's someone out there like that. I do believe that once we get more options here in our own town, that's going to make such a huge difference.
Really appreciate all that. That's lovely. Thank you.
Again, I don't know how much time you have. I know you're very busy. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm going to go into, and I'm going to put this app, it's going to be in the show notes. So anyone who is listening to my audience, you've got to click on this and you've got to download it. It is free. It is full of information. And if you do have questions, Dr. C will answer you back.
I'll try. I'll do my best. Yeah.
There are other people on there too that it appears. And I also ran across somebody on your Instagram. You have an Instagram page for the app and to yourself personally and professionally. There is a yoga person who posted today who is partnering and being part of the app or something like that. And they did share it on Instagram too.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. We have a bunch of patient advocacy partners. So those are non-financial arrangements. We receive financial backing from industry sponsors. That's how we monetize the app and keep it going. But we also have patient advocacy partners, and that's a non-financial arrangement. And that's really just a way for us to collaborate with other patient advocacy networks that have the same patient-facing and patient empowerment agendas, right? It's just really trying to, rather than working at cross purposes, we're going to do a lot better if we all band together. And so being able to support other organizations that are doing great stuff with the same pro-patient agenda, right? Empowerment, full information, really amplifying the patient's voice. Look how powerful that can be. It just basically got CMS to go back on their plan to sunset the S code, like you mentioned at the beginning. So the patient voice is so powerful, and that is how change happens. So we partner with anyone that is willing to exchange links and to help build a traffic network. So we're all in bed together, as it were, and we're all helping each other. And so that's what the patient advocacy partnership is. And probably what you saw today was one of those advocacy groups who's partnered with Breast Advocate. So yeah, the website's breastadvocateapp.com, and then we're on most social media channels. If you just search for Breast Advocate, we should come up. So the yoga person, I think that was a recent collaboration that we've started. So that's good news.
That's awesome. That's what it appears. She posted today a live video. And this app has been around since 2018? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, launched in 2018, and we're currently trying to save our pennies right now for the next version. We're trying to develop the next version, which is going to be incorporating AI and yeah, it's really cool. What we've got planned is really cool. We just need the funding for it. So we're trying to funnel our industry sponsorship away from. We used to spend that money on things like Google Ads, but now a lot of it is thanks to our patient advocate groups that we've partnered with. That has helped us gain some traction. It's guerrilla marketing, as it were. So now we can save money on the downloads. We're not paying for downloads anymore because everything's organic. And so now we can funnel that money, which was quite a lot actually. Now we can funnel that money into development, which is even more expensive than Google Ads. Hopefully the incorporating AI will make it even better, especially with the wizard. I don't know if you saw the wizard that kind of makes recommendations. That's a shared decision-making wizard. That's a lot of complex computing on the back end that we want to add AI to. And then we also want to add a kind of a patient navigator of sorts that's going to be AI based. So, and that's just a couple of the things I would love to do, but it's just money.
Just a small thing.
So that's where industry sponsors come in. Yeah, very exciting times. Yeah, very exciting times.
I love how you talk about the importance of patient advocacy and patients amplifying their voices and making things happen. I have definitely improved on that this whole year just because of my situation. And sometimes I feel like a real ass when I do that to certain people. Like I felt really bad canceling my surgery here in Reno, but I had to, because I know that when you get breast surgery, if you're going to have a mastectomy, you want to do immediate reconstruction. Mm-hmm. That's the best way to do it. And that's what I needed to do. And I, for a little while, really felt like a jerk. And I felt like I was doing something wrong or something. But in my heart, I felt that way. In my mind, I knew I was doing the right thing. So speaking up for myself was really the best thing I could have done. I just think that knowledge is power. And for all of us, physicians, surgeons, patients, caregivers, because when I first decided to go to New Orleans, my husband had a fit. It took about 2 or 3 days before my husband finally looked at the literature and did the research on his own. And he will tell you straight up that it was the best decision we could have made. But he is the type of person to say, no, you have a team here. You need to listen to them. The physician knows surgeon knows what they're doing, which they do. But I had other plans. And then I had to amplify my voice to him to tell him, this is my body. I'm not going to a back alley butcher to get my breast chopped off. This is something that's very personal to me. And this is what I feel is best for my body. So I really greatly appreciate that you also feel that we all need to work on this together. And you, as the surgeon, need to get to know the patient and what their wants, their desires, all of their feelings about what is best for their body.
For sure. And some of the reasons, though, not that this drives the decision to practice this way, because it's work, right? This is all extra, right? And so once you incorporate this into your practice, then yes, it's seamless and it's a pathway, and it becomes very efficient. But whenever you step outside of a routine and try and grow, you mentioned the growth mindset, but that's change, and change is hard. It's easier to do when it's one person. It's harder to do when it's an entire practice of a team of 40 people. But what I want physicians to know is that in some ways, not in some ways, in many ways, they benefit from this too. They benefit from shared decision making, because a patient who is involved in their decisions and in the treatment planning and who does have a voice that is heard, that patient is, number one, fully educated. That means they are more likely to be fully compliant. They are also fully bought in. When things go well, where the surgeon's a genius, right? Oh, I have the best surgeon in the world. I had a great outcome. It's when things don't go according to plan. That's when the rubber meets the road. And so if you don't have patient buy-in, full buy-in over the planning, the treatment planning, the decision-making, and they don't even know why certain things were done, not really, right? They don't truly understand, then that only hurts you on the back end. So not practicing shared decision making, I think, is a lost opportunity, actually, for many physicians. I think their practices would benefit if they incorporated that approach, regardless of the specialty. There are multiple studies out there that have looked at this, and they've tied improved outcomes, improved clinical outcomes, and improved patient satisfaction directly to shared decision making. It's actually a central pillar for Obamacare. Like I said, it's not a new concept. It's very much an older, tried and tested, very mature concept, and it works. So, yeah, there is a lot of intrinsic satisfaction to practicing this way, because patients feel better and they feel included and they feel educated and they feel very appreciative. So it's intrinsically rewarding. But at the same time, it also improves your practice. So you don't even have to do it because you're being a good guy, right? Just there are lots of reasons all the way around. So many benefits to practicing this way.
That is the experience I had in New Orleans. We had some decisions to make together the day before my surgery. And so going into my surgery, I felt a whole heck of a lot better. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I have just a couple more questions. I wanted to know, what advice do you have for those who have just been diagnosed with breast cancer or a high risk gene mutation?
I would say you have more time than you think you do to research your options and be as comfortable as possible with your treatment. For a new cancer diagnosis, that cancer didn't develop yesterday. It's been there for a little bit, and taking a couple of weeks to try and get to grips with your options is not going to make any difference, really. And that doesn't mean putting everything on hold either. There are plenty of things that can be moving along. So ultimately, you don't delay any of your treatment, right? In terms of insurance and that kind of stuff, there's plenty of things you can do. I'm not saying to freeze everything for weeks or months on end. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But it is important to take a little bit of time. You can't have surgery yesterday, and whether you have the surgery tomorrow or in a couple of weeks or in 3 weeks or in a month, it's not going to make a difference.
Okay.
Don't delay things 6 months, but don't let anyone in your medical team make you feel like this is an emergency and you don't have time to ask questions and you don't have time to do a little bit of research. So I think that's a really important point.
I had a really small window of time between the time that I stopped chemo and December. I had to.
But that's what I mean. You were going through chemo. So, you could have been researching surgical options while you were undergoing chemo, for example, right? You don't have to wait until you're done with your chemo to start researching the next step. And I think that's actually part of the problem, is that the way medicine is practiced, everything is stepwise. So it's a need to know basis. So lots of women go through their treatment and then only to find out that, oh, now you'll need radiation. And so, what do you mean now I need radiation? Why are you just telling me about this now? You didn't need to know before. So actually, I would have, it would have been good to know back then. And here's why. And from our standpoint, radiation and reconstruction, that's a very important factor to consider, because it can impact what the best surgical option is, and the timing and lots of things. Really, had you known that you should or could research, while you were sitting there getting your neoadjuvant chemotherapy, would have been ideal time to research your options and find New Orleans or PRMA or wherever. But you also need to know that you can do that, right? Which isn't, when you've got so many things weighing on you and so many things going through your mind, and you're still trying to get to grips with the fact that you have to sit in that chair to have this chemo. It's easy for me to say, oh, you could have been researching your options. And now for you, in retrospect, you're going to look back and say, crap, had I known back then, yeah, I guess that would have been an ideal time. But just remember how you were feeling at that moment.
Yes, I remember very well.
Is this chemo going to work? Am I going to be here in a year? All these things? So it's easier said than done. I get it.
So I think that's why I like the app, is because you can go into that wizard and you can choose, I just was diagnosed with breast cancer, and take it from there. And then you can go back through the wizard and change your answers accordingly. Yep. So with that being said, I was told by a little birdie about deep flap back in the summertime, right after I was diagnosed, and my mind was not even there. I was like super overwhelmed with everything else, doctor's appointments, scans, blood tests, all the things, right? And the prospect of losing my hair and blah. But had I known about this app, which is why I wanted you on this show, because I want people to be able to know about this earlier on, and then they can go through it and answer the questions and look at the comments and look at the research as they're going through the chemo or whatever treatment they are being put through, and then make their decision. So I feel like, because I did it backwards, I want to be able to get people to do it the other way. All right. So what advice do you have for those patients who have breast reconstruction that they are not happy with, perhaps because they have implants that's not agreeing with them mentally or physically?
Yeah, I think this is a nice question. Bring everything together. There are, like we've said, there are other options, right? There are plenty of women who are very happy with implants, and there are plenty of women who are not. If you've had implants, chances are, not always, but most of the time, there are other options in terms of tissue that you can use from the patient's body somewhere else. We can transfer and exchange the implants for tissue, so replace the implants with the patient's own tissue. Even if someone's had a tummy tuck, and if they've had a full tummy tuck before and they don't have the tissue for a deep flap, there are other tissue options. I think it's important to also know that, really emphasize that not all surgeons offer all procedures. And so it's okay to get a second opinion if someone says you're not a candidate for something. So second opinions are very helpful. I'm very quick to suggest to my patients to get one. I think anyone who tries to dissuade a second opinion, I think you should not just seek a second opinion. I think you should run from that physician, because second opinions are extremely valuable. They rarely hurt, even if it's to reinforce that the first opinion and the first recommendation was the right thing to do, probably the best thing to do. So don't shy away from second opinions, and remember that not everyone offers everything, especially in a fee-for-service system. So this conversation is a little bit different if you're in the UK for example, in the National Health Service, where the surgeon gets paid the same irrespective of the procedure they offer, versus in the US, where they may have financial incentives. It's the elephant in the room, right? It's the big gorilla in the corner.
Yes.
But the financial aspect of it matters because, as we've seen with the S code and deep flap surgery, if you don't at least get reimbursed fairly, and it's not financially viable to offer a procedure, then the surgeon is less likely to gain the experience to be able to offer it. And then down the line, not having had the experience and not being able to offer certain procedures, they're only going to offer what they're comfortable with, and we're back to implants again. It's not PC to talk about these things necessarily, but it's the reality of healthcare economics, and it's very important. What you want in society is you want affordable access for everyone through insurance. That's really, everyone should have that. But not everyone is trained in these procedures. Not everyone has the experience. So you may well be a very good candidate for a procedure that your surgeon isn't equipped to offer you. And then it's human nature. I don't want people to think, oh, I went and saw the surgeon and they didn't know how to do it, therefore they dissuaded me. Here's what I'm saying. Even if someone feels they can do a procedure, if they don't do it all the time, human nature dictates that they'll find a reason to offer you something else that they're more comfortable in performing. So we see people from all over the place who have seen other microsurgeons, and they're told they're not a candidate for surgery. And then they see us and we're like, I don't know why this lady was told that, because having a couple of C-sections is not a contraindication to deep flap surgery. Having an umbilical hernia repair in the past is not a contraindication to deep flap surgery. She's got plenty of tissue for what she's looking for. She wants B-cup breasts. She's got plenty of tissue for B-cup breasts. So she's not too skinny. So there are all these reasons that people are quoted, they're told as to why they're not candidates for something. And if you see someone that does a lot of that procedure, then, the recommendation may well be different. Don't shy away from a second opinion.
Okay. Number one, thank you for talking about things that are not, quote, PC.
You're welcome.
Because I really think that is incredibly important for patients to have in their mind of why they're getting responses, the kinds of responses they're getting. And thank you for also bringing in getting a second and maybe even a third opinion, because answers are different. And I have experienced that myself in the last year. And so I'm very much, and it's not about not trusting your doctor or your surgeon or whatever. You yourself, you tell people, get a second opinion, see what somebody else has to say, and then you can make your own decision of what you want to go with. Just the mere fact that you tell your patients that, or at least suggest it tells me that you are more caring about the patient and the outcome and what's best for them. So thank you for that. I want to wrap this up by letting my audience know that I've got some really great resources and ways to contact you. I have your email address in there, and I also have your Instagram link on there. Resources. I have your link tree in there. I've been stalking you.
That's great. That's great. The link tree is great. My link tree, Breast Advocate's link tree.
I also have the Breast Advocate website and also the Breast Advocate on Instagram. Is there anything else I should add to that?
No, okay. I think with the link tree, everything is there.
Perfect.
So we've got a really good YouTube channel, the Breast Advocate YouTube channel, but that's on the,
on the link tree.
Yeah.
I just thoroughly appreciate your taking the time. I know you are very busy, but clearly very interested in getting really important information out there to patients and caregivers and other providers. So thank you for being on my podcast. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you again for the invitation and to thank you for your efforts advocating for patients and what you're doing. And it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I know that women who are following in your footsteps are really going to appreciate it. And unfortunately, the number of women who are following in your footsteps is only going up on a yearly basis. So thank you for what you're doing.
Hey, thank you for saying so, because I feel like I have a purpose and a mission and an interest, and I want to help as many people as I possibly can. I hope the rest of your day is amazing. And to my audience, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts, and we will see you next time on the next episode. Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I'm open for guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being guests on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. Breast cancer is such an epidemic, so the more empowered we are, the better. I rely on people like you to listen, rate, review, and share this podcast with your loved ones. So please enjoy my trailer and any other episodes. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm on Apple, Spotify, and other platforms. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts. See you next time.